Welcome to Disaffected. I'm Joshua Slocum, and this is the show where we talk about politics, culture, and relationships through a psychological lens. It's March 16th, 2025. To my surprise, the election results of last November, and then the speed with which the Trump administration has been taking a wrecking ball to wokeness, gave me more hope than I anticipated. I'm not a very hopeful person. I was nearly at the point of accepting that the U.S. and Western society was over. Today, I'm not entirely convinced that it's not over. I think it's plausible that wokeness, which is a disconnection from reality and a reversal of the truth, that wokeness went on so long and got so deep that it can't be eradicated any more than you can ever fully get rid of kudzu once it takes over a piece of land. But the election and its aftermath gave me enough hope to make it seem worth it to look forward to the future. That's still the case, but it's a little less the case today. My hope is tempering. It looks to me like we're in a time of unveiling, where the true depth of this ideology is still being exposed. I don't think we've seen the true depth of it yet. We're seeing it now. As the administration pushes back and does its slash and burn, the entrenched politicians, the media, the activists are still in fight back mode. That's to be expected. But still, the tenacity of the left in their fight back reaction and their literally lunatic ideas that have captured the Democrat leftist mind, all of this leaves me disturbed. It's making me ask some questions like, if a near landslide election plus several months of actions demonstrating that this administration means exactly what it says and this stuff is not going to continue, if that's not enough to make Democrats even slightly embarrassed to call a man a woman, what action will be enough? Or will we discover that the cult of wokeness, and it is a full cult, it's not cult-like, it's a full cult, will we discover that that's usually terminal for people who have it? Will we find out that it's as bad as we feared, and that the majority of people infected with it can't come out of it and aren't ever going to come out of it? And if that's the case, what does that mean for us? What do we have to do to steer society in a new direction? What will we have to do to disempower and cordon off the terminal cases, knowing that they can't be remediated? Do we have the will to do this? Or will liberals and timid conservatives work against those of us who keep pushing? Will we neuter our own side and go back to civility politicking? Oh, don't make too much noise. Don't be too mean. Be gracious. We don't have the time and retrospection that we'll have in the future. It may turn out that what I'm worried about right now won't be a long-term worry, and that right now just seems bigger and larger and longer to people like me than it will turn out to be over time. It may be that what we're going through right now is simply what we have to go through for an indeterminate period of time until the tantrums subside and more realignments take place. But it may not turn out that way. It may be that wokeness is terminal for most people, or for a really big percentage of them. It may turn out that it's terminal for our society. We might be living through the big one that we can't come back from. I don't know. But here's one example of the kind of behavior that's provoking these questions for me. It's a single event. It may turn out to be a blip, but you can extrapolate from this event to understand the kind of reactions that I'm seeing and that are causing me worry about the near-term future. The other day, a U.S. House committee was holding a hearing. I don't remember what the topic was, and it doesn't matter. That committee was chaired by Texas Republican Representative Keith Self, and the committee included a legislator, a man who calls himself Sarah. His name was actually Tim McBride. Tim McBride, Sarah McBride, is a representative from Delaware. He's a man who calls himself a woman. Well, the chairman, Keith Self, is no longer playing any gender games at all. in opening the hearing, in the opening of the hearing, his fellow committee member, Bill Keating, a Democrat from Massachusetts, Bill Keating got emotional and shouty because Chairman Keith Self referred to McBride as Mr. McBride. Now, we expect Democrats to get hysterical over their cult nonsense, but look at this clip and marvel at how confident and brazen Bill Keating is castigating the chairman of the committee.
As the representative from Delaware, Mr. McBride.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ranking Member Keating, also wonderful.
Mr.
I'm
Chairman,
sorry.
could you repeat your introduction again, please?
Yes, we have set the standard on the floor of the House, and I'm simply.
What is that standard, Mr. Chairman? Would you repeat what you just said when you introduced a duly elected representative from the United States of America? Please.
I will. The representative from Delaware, Mr. McBride.
Mr. Chairman, you are out of order. Mr. Chairman, have you no decency? I've come to know you a little bit, but this is not decent.
We will continue this
You
hearing.
will not continue it with me unless you introduce a duly elected representative the right way.
This hearing is adjourned.
Okay, a couple of funnies there. The first one, I'm sorry, you've got to give the devil his due. When Sarah McBride immediately answered by saying, Madam Chairman, I fell off my chair because it's just funny. But notice how committee member Bill Keating broke all the rules of procedure. He gave orders to the chairman. He yelled at the chairman. He scolded the chairman. And he did it all with the tone of voice that indicated that he truly believes that he has the moral, political, and cultural power on his side that allows him to overturn the hierarchy and control and punish the chairman. You're out of order. That's not for you to decide, sir. That's for the chairman. I mean, in other words, it's like these employees. You see it in young. This is surprising behavior from someone of Bill Keating's age. You see this in young people all the time. They do actually believe that they get to fire the boss. If they don't like the boss, they don't have to do what the boss says. They can fire the boss and get the boss fired. They can tell the boss to shut up. Inversion, right? Now, I don't know whether Chairman Keith Self's decision to bang his gavel and say this meeting is adjourned, I don't know if it indicates good or ill. I don't know if he meant it to set a deterrent to onlookers, to make a statement that something like, if you behave in this way, this meeting is over and I dismiss you, you won't get any work done until you stop this behavior. That's one interpretation. But might it have been a capitulation? Or might it be received as a capitulation? I mean, after all, shouty Bill Keating told the chairman there wasn't going to be any hearing until he introduced a duly elected representative the right way, and Self just said, okay, the meeting is adjourned. Did that signal that the chairman gave in? Will Bill Keating and Democrats like this, will they read this as a victory? Will this embolden them to do this even more in committee meetings and paralyze the government more? I don't know, but I do worry. My deeper worry, though, is how many Bill Keatings are out there. People like him are leftists who apparently cannot be brought back to reality. They're so far gone that they're getting obviously emotionally hysterical. I mean, did you hear him? I think that's genuine. He's really upset. He's starting to, do this gesture on the table, and he's, have you no decency? This isn't the goddamn McCarthy hearings. Please, write some new material. He's angry and he's willing to disrupt the government because he believes a gay man who's now a transvestite is actually a woman, must be referred to as a woman, and that this is so important that whatever government work brought them to this table must be shut down until that act of lying obedience is performed to his satisfaction. That kind of display from somebody like Keating, had it occurred even in the recent past, would have made him unelectable. It would have ended his political career immediately and probably his money-making career as well. He may even have been viewed as someone who was in need of psychiatric care. I'm not joking. And yeah, he should be viewed as someone who might be in need of psychiatric care. That's not normal. We're so far through the looking glass that it's hard for me to figure out if I'm describing the depth of what I mean by this. And it's not that I don't have words to describe things. I have lots of words, but it's that we've gone so far that I'm not even sure that other human beings are thinking and processing words and concepts the way I am, or in a way that's mutually intelligible to most people. Let me try for an analogy. Imagine that you're talking to somebody about why your car has to be fueled with diesel fuel, not gasoline. You can't use gasoline because not only will gasoline not work in your car, but putting gasoline in your diesel engine will actually destroy the engine because they're built differently. Imagine that the person you're explaining this to tells you that you're wrong, you can use gasoline, but he can't explain to you why you're wrong. But he's very certain that you are, and he's very emotional about it. Then you realize that the guy you're talking to, it's not that he doesn't understand the diesel thing, he literally doesn't understand what an internal combustion engine is. He doesn't get that. That's the level of disconnection from reality that we're seeing with these objecting, screaming, crying, obstructionist Democrats and leftists. I'm asking myself, do you people understand, at base as a concept, what sex is? Biological sex. Do they understand, as concepts, what verbs are? Do they know what role nouns play in communicating things? Like I said, I find this difficult to explain. It's almost down to the level of talking about a term that philosophers use called qualia. Qualia are those subjective experiences. They happen inside your mind. They're your emotions, your feelings, pain, pleasure. They're those sensations that we cannot directly share with each other. We can only talk about them, but we can't actually share the feeling. And we can't directly intuit them in other people. So I'm asking about Democrats and leftists, do they even share the same qualia that most people do? When I experience pain, do they experience the same sensation that I am experiencing when I talk about pain? Or do they have an experience that I would call pleasure, but they call pain? I'm no longer certain that human beings are having analogous and comparable experiences that are generalizable enough that we can effectively communicate with each other. And I thought of another example that might convey this. Try to think back on one of those science fiction novels or movies that you have taken in. I was about to say consumed, and then I would have been on to content that you consumed. Imagine one of those science fiction movies that's about alien first contact. The researchers have to start at the very basics. With no shared language, there's nothing to translate. First, they have to figure out if the aliens recognize and experience the universe in roughly the same way that humans do. So, for example, do the aliens understand concepts like affirmative and negative? Do they understand and experience binary number logic, the difference between 1 and 0? Do they understand that 1 can represent a yes and 0 can represent a no? And if they do, how will we know that they do? Somebody commented on this because this is a version of an article that I had on Substack this week, and she brought up from Star Trek: The Next Generation that famous episode Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra, where Captain Picard is stranded for a time on an alien planet with an alien. The universal translator isn't working. Excuse me. And this is literally where they have to start with each other. That's where I'm at with these leftists. I'm not sure if we're experiencing the same world in roughly the same ways. Now, imagine you're at a bar at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. You walk into a bar at 2 p.m., never been there before. And you see that the bar is full of regulars who seem to know each other. They seem affable, but you know that you're the new guy, and so you have to tread a little bit lightly. You're on their territory, and you need to adapt yourself to their mores. So the main guy doing all the talking at the bar, well, he points out the window to the parking lot. And since it's mid-afternoon, it's 2 p.m., the sun's blazing down on the cars. But this guy, this regular at the bar says, man, it's getting darker and darker as summer comes on. By tomorrow, it's going to be impossible to find your car in the parking lot without a flashlight. Imagine that everyone at the bar agrees with him. And then they start chipping in with stories about how they stubbed their toes or twisted their ankles when they were kids, trying to pick their way through the darkness of full summer sun. I know you're laughing a little bit. You think it's unrealistic, but it's not. You think you'd immediately recognize that they were all suffering from a mass delusion, but I'm not sure you would immediately recognize that. Not so fast. There's a pretty good chance that at least some of you would start questioning your own sanity. Is he right? Does the sun actually make it dark outside? Have you been misled your whole life? After all, everyone at the bar agrees. Are you sure it's not you who's crazy? This is how the concept of the reversal, the narcissistic reversal, or very similarly, the big lie, this is how they work. If you tell the opposite of the truth with enough conviction and with social solidarity on your side, you absolutely can convince normal, otherwise sane people to disbelieve their own eyes and question whether they're crazy. Transgenderism got as far as it did in society because it uses the reversal, it uses the big lie. It brazenly claims that men are women and women are men, and it acts genuinely shocked when you disagree. People are so stunned by this that they stay silent, and then person by person they start agreeing. So I talked a minute ago about how Bill Keating, the Democrat who yelled at the chairman, lost his composure, shouted at Keith Self because Keith Self correctly referred to another lawmaker as Mr. McBride. Now, the day after this incident, McBride himself worked the big lie and the reversal just as hard as he could. And this works on almost anybody who's on the left. True to narcissistic form, he called a press conference and talked about how people who won't call men women are weird and obsessed with weird issues. Let's take a look at it.
We will not take a lecture on decorum from a party that incited an insurrection. I appear to live rent-free in the minds of some of my Republican colleagues. I wish that they would spend even a fraction of the time that they spend thinking about me, thinking about how to lower the costs for American families. I wish they would spend a fraction of the time that they spend thinking about me, figuring out how to make government actually work better, rather than making it work worse in order to prove that government can't work. They are obsessed with culture war issues. The Republican Party is obsessed with culture war issues. It is weird and it is bizarre. And the American people deserve serious legislators, serious elected officials who are focused on bringing people together to deliver real results for the American people, not to play games and not to engage in schoolyard taunts.
Absolutely mistressful use of the big lie. Tim McBride is talking about himself. There is one reason and one reason only that he ran for Congress, and that is so that he can be talked about by other people. He is a narcissist. He's doing the big reversal. They're weird. We deserve serious legislators. While you stand up there telling us that wearing a suit off the rack from Lane Bryant. Tell me more about how I'm weird, Sarah. All right, time to come up for a break. I want to remind you that if you are a supporting member, if you chip in a few bucks every month and help us make this show and put food on our table, you are invited to our monthly member meetups every first Saturday of the month. We have them in something called the Sanity Lounge online, and I post the details for that in the prior week coming up. So that comes up every first Saturday of the month. And if you'd like to get in on that, just become a supporting member. It's a very modest ask of $7 a month. You can go to disaffectedpod.substack.com or subscribestar.com/disaffected. And of course, if you are looking for somebody to talk to about an abuse situation, a cluster B dynamic, whether it's going on at home, at school, with your boss, at your church, I offer private 1-hour confidential coaching and consulting sessions that you can book through joshuaslocum.net. And when you get there, if you don't see a time and date that works for you, send me an email through the website. Tell me when is a good time and date for you, and I am happy to accommodate and make an outside of listed hours appointment if I have the time to do that. Come back and see us after the break.
Disaffected is now streaming on X. Come with us each Sunday and dare to notice reality. You can find us on X at DisaffectedPod.
It is 5 years this month since the beginning of the alleged pandemic. Happy anniversary. I call it the alleged pandemic because we didn't have a pandemic. We didn't have a pandemic that looked anything like what we understood the term pandemic to mean before 2020. The Black Death was a real pandemic. It carried off between 1/3 and 2/3 of the population of Europe. By contrast, COVID took less than 0.5% of the people who got it. Essentially 0 children died from COVID, and almost 0 people died from COVID who were not elderly or already immune compromised. It wasn't a pandemic, it was a rough flu season. But now it's permanent. It's now known as the pandemic. This is being cemented in our cultural history right now. History is going to falsely call this a pandemic instead of what it really was, which was a nearly successful takeover of the West by a communist dictatorship project. No one involved, from Biden to Fauci to the rest of the government on down, has faced any consequences, and they won't face them. There won't be any consequences. There won't be a reckoning. There won't be trials at The Hague. Nothing is going to happen. Many government leaders, in my view, are actually guilty of hanging offenses. I mean treason. Yeah, the kind of treason that carries the death penalty. Yes, I mean that. I'm going to do my best to make sure that what happened isn't forgotten, because that's all I can do in my small way. Former New York Times reporter Alex Berenson, who's been through cancellations of his own, he wrote an article looking back on the alleged pandemic. It starts this way. Quote, "The left wants you to forget what happened in 2020. I don't mean COVID. As today's drumbeat of 5 years later stories proves, woke reporters don't want you to forget COVID or how scared you were of the virus back then. In fact, they're annoyed that you've, quote, rewritten history and forgotten your fear." Next quote. "But of course you've forgotten that fear, because you know the truth. In July 2021, as the relentlessly grinding American COVID death clock passed 600,000, I wrote one of the truest, cruelest sentences of my career. I'm just going to say it. 600,000 deaths has never looked more like 0. Now I'm going to read to you a little more from the article. 600,000 deaths has never looked more like 0. True then, truer now. The reason isn't just that COVID had an initial infection fatality rate of 0.3% and maybe less, meaning that on its first pass, it would kill only 1 in 300 people who got it. The reason is that more than the flu, and far more than the panickers will admit even now, COVID targeted the very old and the very sick. I'll never forget asking my doctor how many of his patients had died of COVID. He has since retired, but at that time he was in his 80s. Given his age and the fact that he was in New York City, I assumed he would have lost half a dozen or more. The answer was 1. a guy in his 90s. Yes, the death of almost any human being is a tragedy, but that sad, true, banal fact does not mean that society must do anything and everything it can to prevent every death. Everyone dies sooner or later. Pretending we can undo that reality, like pretending we can make pain disappear, is not merely false but wrong-headed. It inevitably produces perverse and wretched outcomes. Pain and death are our portion as human beings. We can't make them vanish, only delay them a bit. If we're lucky, we're not gods, and we are surely not God. End quote. Now, saying anything close to what Alex just wrote 5 years ago, hell, even 2 years ago, was enough to get your blog taken down by major platforms, fired from your job, and rendered unemployable because you have a stained reputation. That's still happening to some degree today. YouTube is still pulling down episodes of this show and other shows that talk about this with a label calling it medical misinformation. They're still putting up automatic good information boxes underneath videos that reference the pandemic, pulled from the corrupt Centers for Disease Control and World Health Organization, which, of course, the WHO, thank you, Trump, has pulled us out of. We are no longer part of that body. Alex Berenson points out that the authorities knew very early on that the worst predictions about the coronavirus did not turn out to be true. They did know, and they knew it early. As in 2020, they knew this. We knew in 2020 that children were not being sickened or killed by this. We knew in 2020 that hospitals were not actually overflowing. Do you remember the field hospitals and the hospital ships? Here's a picture. Headline, in New York, overflow hospitals at Javits and on Navy ship have largely been empty. What's the date on that? April 6, 2020. Just about a month after the panic started, and the hospital ships remain empty. More from Alex Berenson. Quote, New York had everything going against it, very high density apartments and subways to produce rapid spread, a stressed municipal hospital system, and unhealthy population, and yet the coronavirus did not overrun the hospitals. The city's high death rates that first month probably had more to do with an over-reliance on ventilators and panic at badly run nursing homes than anything else. Next quote. By late April 2020, the medical crisis was over, the field hospitals closed, and the hospital ships sailed away. The new ventilators, only just arriving, were sent to warehouses. They'd be mothballed without ever being used. Yeah, that's right. Field hospitals and medical hospital ships, they were all closed down in a month. The authorities knew they were unnecessary, and we knew they were too. To the extent that we saw any of these things happening, we also knew it. We weren't all just lied to. We lied to ourselves. One more quote from Alex here. For the media and the public health bureaucrats, the COVID panic was only just a beginning. Why? Because they had seen how useful it could be. It was a way to remake society, to rebuild the United States along the lines of Europe, to empower the welfare state as never before, to make real the great communitarian dreams of universal health care and universal basic income. Boom. And it worked. Just here in the U.S., and this is a very short, very incomplete list that just came off the top of my head. Here's what happened in our country. The CDC violated the Constitution by taking control of the rental apartment market and forcing landlords not to evict tenants who didn't pay rent, and they did this on public health grounds, because if you kicked them out, they might spread COVID. This was an obvious communist move. But it worked because it took a long time for the Supreme Court to render it illegal, and it already had time to do all of its damage. By that point, small, normal people landlords had lost rental income. Some of them lost their houses. Some of them couldn't pay property taxes. And you know what happens when you can't pay property taxes? Why, that's right. The government comes in and seizes your property. It makes it its property and then auctions it off and keeps the proceeds. Oh, you're so hyperbolic to call it communist, Josh, right? Governors across the country issued illegal orders forcing citizens to stay home, forcing them not to socialize, forcing them to close their businesses, lose their livelihoods, and most Americans buckled under with no protest. Here in Vermont, alleged Republican Governor Phil Scott issued an order making it illegal to walk outside on the sidewalk accompanied by anyone who is not a physical resident of your household. This is America? He also issued an order requiring anyone who traveled out of state to self-quarantine for 2 weeks when they came back to Vermont. I ignored both of these because fuck you. Who do you think you are? And for my trouble, I got lectured by a doctor who yelled at me in the urgent care office for breaking the law, and then she kicked me out because I wouldn't promise her that I'd self-quarantine. The fuck do you think you are? The White House kicked thousands of soldiers out of the military because they refused the so-called vaccines. Remember how we knew in spring of 2020 that it wasn't really a pandemic? Here's what happened a year later. 1 year later, we already knew. Here's Joe Biden, headline from 2021, sweeping new vaccine mandates for 100 million Americans. Quote, this is from the Associated Press. In his most forceful pandemic actions and words, President Joe Biden on Thursday ordered sweeping new federal vaccine requirements for as many as 100 million Americans, private sector employees, as well as healthcare workers and federal contractors in an all-out effort to curb the surging COVID-19 Delta variant. Are you having a little nostalgia? You're remembering your variants? It's like Garbage Pail Kids. You got to collect them all. There was original COVID, extra crispy, Delta, Omicron. Oh my God. I had a charm bracelet with all the COVIDs. Next quote, speaking at the White House, Biden sharply criticized the tens of millions of Americans who are not yet vaccinated despite months of availability and incentives. Quote, we've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin, and your refusal has cost all of us, he said, all but biting off his words. The unvaccinated minority, quote, can cause a lot of damage, and they are, end quote. That was 2021, again, a year after we already knew this was not a dangerous pandemic. Now, Substack writer Ben Sixsmith, he's a Brit. He calls himself part of the, quote, very online right, and discusses how even conservatives like him were afraid in the beginning, before we knew more, about what COVID might do to people. And a lot of us were afraid right in the beginning. I was nervous right in the beginning. We simply didn't know, but it didn't take long for us to know. But here's the worrying part. In an otherwise really good article, something jumped out at me. I'll read you a paragraph. Soon, the unthinkable had become the unquestionable. Politicians who had poo-pooed the idea of closures and masks were insisting on them with unprecedented severity. By and large, I agreed with them. In fact, almost everyone agreed with them. Apart from Peter Hitchens, the only dissenters I saw online had names like Education Realist and the G-Man. Well, you know why, Ben? You know why you didn't see any other dissenters online? It's because we were all thrown off. We weren't allowed to speak. We got suspended from Twitter. We got kicked off YouTube. Now, Ben is a Brit, and we all know that they do not have a value called freedom of speech and freedom of movement. They claim that they do. They claim it. I know they do, and I know some of you Brits are going to get angry at me when you hear this. I'm sorry, but I'm right. You claim that you value free speech, but you don't actually value free speech as a country. You never even bothered to write it down. I listen to you, British people, I love you, but for Christ's sake, you talk about your constitution, you don't have a constitution. You don't have a written document. It's whatever people interpret it to be as you talk about it. So cut the crap, okay? You don't have freedom of speech. You certainly it's not codified. I think the Brits are very, very wrong on these foundational issues, freedom of movement and freedom of speech. But the fact that a conservative like Ben Sixsmith agreed that it was a good idea to force people to mask, to force them to quarantine, to force them to stay indoors, that's conservative. That it was right and proper for the government to lock you down? That's fucking terrifying, Ben. Have you thought better of it yet? You see what's going on in Britain. You see them losing their country. They are losing their country. It's turned into a third world caliphate. They're overrun with illegal immigrants. They've got Muslim murders, fire bombings, and shittification of their neighborhoods and villages constantly every day. Muslim rape gangs targeting white girls because nobody gives a flying fuck about white girls, even if they're English. That's Britain. And it happened because conservatives agreed with things like this. I don't think Britain has the will to save itself. I hope it does, but I'm sorry I've given up on you guys. This is what's more frightening than the government. Us. You and me. All of us. We ordinary citizens let this happen. In fact, we made it happen. We called snitch lines on quarantine breakers. We said, yes, sir, when the government told us to shut our businesses down. Millions of families excommunicated their unvaccinated family members or merely those who were insufficiently enthusiastic about the COVID narrative. They're still estranged. Many people are permanently now estranged from their families. I help people deal with the fallout of that all the time in my private consulting with my clients. I hear it all the time, all over the country. It was us, the U.S. citizens and other citizens of the Western world. It's us who I fear. We are not equal to the task of defending our own historical or present freedoms. In the U.S., we have flushed our heritage and our patrimony right down the toilet. The framers would be appalled to see what kind of people we are. Now, we are trying to redeem ourselves. Maybe we have with this election. I'm not secure in that thought yet, though. Here, I pulled this up from the way back when. Take a look at this graphic. This is from Zuby, musician and conservative commentator, podcaster. He's got at least 1 million followers on Twitter. He ran this survey in October of 2020, and his question is, if you wear a face mask regularly, what's the main reason why? And he got 36,000 responses. Here's how it breaks down. 6% said they wore a mask because of fear of catching the virus. 7% said for fear of spreading the virus. 28% said they wore a mask out of fear of shame and punishment. And here's the remainder. 60% said they wore a mask because of a sense of courtesy and respect. To keep you caught up, remember, we knew early in 2020 that the mass deaths weren't happening, they weren't going to happen. And we still went into full communist dystopia for years afterwards. In hearing from people around the U.S., I know that those who lived in the South and in other parts of the country that are more freedom-oriented, more conservative or libertarian, they don't actually understand what it was like in Blue America. I know this because they keep pushing back on me when I try to describe this stuff. Well, that didn't happen. Yeah, it did. It didn't happen in your neighborhood. It did happen in mine. But yeah, it was happening. If it wasn't happening in their region, it was happening all over Blue Democrat U.S. In the interest of not forgetting what that was like, I'm going to read you a piece that I wrote back in 2023. Remember, 2 years, almost full 2 years after we knew that this was not a dangerous pandemic. Here's the essay. What I'm about to tell you is not a camp joke. Many of us are actually living in Stepford, Connecticut. The one from 1975, the Stepford Wives, the original, not the comedy remake. Those of you in Gen X and early boomerhood will remember how good 1970s horror and science fiction really was. The made-for-TV adaptation of Ira Levin's novel, The Stepford Wives, runs circles around any modern, big-budget, so-called horror theatrical release. And because it captures this, I think you know this feeling, it captures the feeling that you got when you watched movies like this. Another good one is Invasion of the Body Snatchers. The feeling was that you were being spied on, that a thin veil separated you from a world that looked almost, but not quite, like the real one. This is the feeling I experience every day leaving my house and interacting in public in Burlington, Vermont. Yesterday, I went to a specialty locksmith to get a set of keys cut. This is a family business that's been in town forever. It's the place you go to for serious lock and security needs. They really know their stuff. The key grinders are cast iron mechanicals manufactured in the 1940s that still work like a dream. They can cut keys from any guide set. They don't have any of these flashing touchscreen modern key cutters that only recognize keys they've been programmed to recognize. So here I am, and I go up to the front door, and there's a sign there in all caps. It says, "We have a 2-person limit at this time!" Exclamation point. "Ring the buzzer to be allowed in and wait to be called!" Exclamation point. So I ring the buzzer. 1 minute later, I barely hear the door lock opening because no, they won't talk. They won't give you the courtesy of saying hello to you over the intercom. You just wait until you can hear that they're buzzing you in. And I enter a small lobby with 2 cash registers, one on the left, one on the right. From the counter to the ceiling, all the way to the ceiling, there is COVID plexiglass. It's all sealed in. Then I see another sign. "Stand 6 feet apart." Next line, 6 feet! Exclamation point. The plexiglass is tightly sealed at all of the seams, and just above the counter, 2 very small rectangular panels were cut out. It's like the ones you see in New York City bodegas to pass cash through, but that you rarely see out of, or didn't used to see outside of crime-infested cities. But these little pass-throughs were so small that many people would not be able to actually get a hand in there to give cash or a credit card. And then I saw the sign above the pass-through, and it said, "No reaching your hand through the pass-through!" Exclamation point. And there are 2 staff on duty. In the modern manner, they don't greet you. They turn away from you mid-sentence to answer the phone because somebody calling on the phone is infinitely more important than talking to you who's there in person. And they have no manners whatsoever. Both the employees are wearing masks, great big black N95 plague doctor masks with cones that obscure 3/4 of their face. The only thing you can see are their eyes. And it was February 2023 when I wrote this, by the way. Now in comes a third employee who's stocking parts, and this third employee shares a set of characteristics with the other employees, one of the other employees. What is that? Neither of them can be sexed. I literally could not tell what sex they were, and I'm very finely tuned to picking that up. Why couldn't I tell? Number one, morbid obesity on both of them had obliterated all visible bone structure. And also covered, not only the facial structure, but the body. You couldn't even tell body shape. The shape was simply fat. It was impossible to see male or female features. Both of them had voices that are just in that overlapping range between male and female. So it wasn't possible for me to tell whether I was hearing an androgynous voice that might be male or if I was hearing a female who had testosterone frog voice. Absolutely no way to tell. But both of them had adorned themselves with light makeup, piercings, jewelry, and poison candy color hair that clearly said to everybody, "I am LGBTQ whatever." And if they had personalities, let alone the disordered variety, you wouldn't know because they had no affect. I don't mean they had an odd affect. I mean that they had no affect at all. Dead eyes, monotone speech, no pitch shift in the sentences, movements that looked more like they were falling in a direction than actually deciding to go to a certain place. It made my skin crawl, and I had the stirrings of what felt like it was going to turn into a panic attack. I thought to myself, this is not normal, this is new normal. And it's demoralizing me more every day. This is what it's like in Vermont. This is what it's like in any heavily Democrat progressive area today. From talking with disaffected supporters all around the US and around the world, I know that it's not like this in many places. People who live in more southern or Midwestern states happily report that not everyone is broken. I'm glad. But when you hear something like this from somebody like me, you're not just hearing about one man's experience in one city called Burlington, Vermont. Millions of Americans are living in cities and states and regions that are like this, and I know this because they tell me. Like me, they're noticers. Noticers have finely honed observational skills. Their gut intuitions, while not perfect, are pretty accurate. Noticers like me often feel observed, surveilled, monitored. We can see it and we can feel it. We know what that very quick glance and the darting look away, we know what that means. We can sense when we're being sized up in public, when someone's trying to suss out whether we've been robotized or whether we're still human. It's not paranoia, it's very real. In the Stepford Wives, it turned out to be retired Disney Imagineers who clandestinely abducted their wives and replaced them or altered them into animatronic copies. They wanted docile, flighty, thoroughly domesticated wives whose greatest joy, aside from putting out, was washing dishes. In Stepford, Vermont, the roles were reversed. The Imagineers here are women, and they want docile, mindless, thoroughly domesticated, and compliant husbands and sons and daughters and girlfriends. Every day I hear a line from the Stepford Wives in my mind. "Bobby, you've changed," Joanna said to the animatronic replacement of her formerly lively and vivacious friend. Bobby turns around, flips her hair and smiles and says, "Isn't it wonderful?" Yeah. All right. This episode is sponsored again by the letter B for Biltong. BiltongUSA.com. Biltong is delicious cured meat. It's like very gourmet beef jerky and better than any you've ever had. BiltongUSA.com is run by Anton Van Vuren and his family. They're from South Africa, and Biltong is a South African way of vinegar and spice curing meat. They've got beef, they've got spicy, they've got non-spicy, they've got venison, they've got kangaroo, and they also have a nice selection of European and British groceries if you're an expat living in the States and you want a little taste at home. So head to BiltongUSA.com and remember to use promo code JOSH. That will get you 10% off your order, and it'll let them know that you heard about their great product from us. Come back on the other side.
Disaffected is now streaming on X. Come with us each Sunday and dare to notice reality. You can find us on X at DisaffectedPod.
Are you subscribed to us on audio? And what I mean is, on your podcast player, is Disaffected among your subscribed podcasts? If not, you really should, because we're starting to put out audio-only content again. For the second week in a row, we have more for you. I want to play you a little teaser and get you interested. I had a conversation with the lovely Kate Wand. She was a guest on the show about 3 weeks to a month ago, and we had a much longer conversation about cluster B in families and about what happens when you have baby boom generation parents raising millennial generation kids. So let's take a little listen to my conversation with Kate.
But how old were you? How long ago was it when you first said to yourself in a clear, non-ambiguous way, I have people with cluster B in my family background? When did you know what personality disorders, narcissism, borderline instability, when did you come to that knowledge?
Well, I would say that the seeds of it probably happened about 10 years ago, but I was certain of it 7 years ago when I met my husband. And seeing kind of, there was just this family mobbing event, in a nuclear family, especially a dysfunctional family, when somebody else is added into the mix, it changes the dynamics. And somebody coming into a system that is dysfunctional or narcissistic, it's going to make everybody very uncomfortable. And so my husband and I, but I guess more specifically, it was about me, experienced this kind of family scapegoating event. And that's when I was like, okay, there's really something going on here that's bigger than I thought.
If you want to hear what was going on that was bigger than what Kate thought, if you want to hear the end of that story and the family mobbing scapegoating event, then you need to subscribe to Disaffected on audio. We are on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts. I guess they don't call it iTunes anymore. Any place you're on with your podcast player, you will find Disaffected. So give it a listen and let us know what you think. Now, let's close out the show by having some fun. Do you know what time it is? That's right, it is time for Potpourri du Mockery, the part of the show where we roast the skin off everyone. Allons-y. First, a listen back to Francis Collins, former director of the National Institutes for Health.
Somewhere past the pandemic, when we're free, there's a life I remember, full of activity. Somewhere past the pandemic, no.
Kevin's talking to me in my ear. Thank God it's so much better than Francis Collins.
We'll all stay well and healthy, thanks to a safe vaccine.
Are you having fun?
Thank God these shots came very fast.
Okay, that's enough. I swear to God, it's like sitting down to watch, remember the beginning of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood where he would come in and put on his Talking to Kids sweater and his Talking to Kids sneakers? Well, it's like sitting down to watch Mr. Rogers, only to have him sit down and peel off his human mask and reveal his lizard face. There's the lizard face. Sorry, my timing was off on that. You recognize that, right? Yeah. Some of you, in fact, I know by name, I know at least one weekly viewer, thank you, love you, he's going to get this first and he's going to tell us where that's from. And some of the rest of you will too. It's a Gen X thing. So what I'm going to show you here, I did not put this on the show 2 weeks ago when we were talking about the Trump speech to Congress, but get a load of Nancy Pelosi during that speech, gurning like a palsy patient. The music. We're going to need bigger dentures. I swear to God, she looks like she's doing a celebrity promo for Denture Cream or L-Dopa. My shrink once said to me that if I wanted to study the effects of abusive parenting, neglect, and intergenerational trauma, that all I needed to do was go shopping at Walmart. And he's right. But this applies apparently to Target too. Here's a group of families, ranging from 8-year-old kids to late middle-aged people, flouncing through Target with signs to shame Target for pulling trans and queer pride merchandise that was aimed at children. Shame on oh no, it's not. Oh, it's shame on Target for cutting DEI. Trans rights are human rights. Trans lives matter. Trans lives matter. Oh, look, is that the Dairy Queen? Jesus Christ. Look at these people. You know, some of these people are the kind of dirty that needs, it's like those poor birds that they rescue with Dawn dish soap after they get stuck in an oil slick. I just want to sit all these people down and do this to them. Scrub, 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 scrub. And you know they'd make the noise too. Do you know the official noise of that bird? It's this. Squawk! It's the exact noise of that, because that bird is actually a pterodactyl, just like you saw in the Flintstones. Remember when Fred and Wilma wanted music, so they put a record on the record player and they had the pterodactyl and they put his beak down. Squawk! All right. Here's a short person on the street, interview by conservative podcaster Ariel Scarcella. She caught up with a ham-beast female with poisoned candy color hair and face metal, explaining how she is a gay man.
We're trans men and we're gay. We like guys.
Do you have gender dysphoria?
Yes, heavily.
But you're still femme presenting?
Yeah, I still femme present. I find it comfortable, but at the same time, it does get hard when I can't look mask.
So do you identify as gay or queer?
As queer.
As queer. That's fair, because you're trans guys, right? That's fair. What about you?
Queer as well.
Queer. What about you?
I am not a trans gay man. I identify as a pansexual.
I forgot about that part. You know, we have some things to go through. She says, I still femme present. It sounds like an over-the-counter painkiller for menstruation. Today, tomorrow, femme present. I mean, what? And you know what? Actually, can you recue that, Kevin? Can you start from the beginning? I want people to hear this one more time.
We're trans men and we're gay. We like guys.
Do you have gender dysphoria?
Yes, heavily.
But you're still femme presenting?
Yeah, I still femme present. I find it comfortable, but at the same time, it does get hard when I
she
can't
said hard.
look mask.
Okay, that's enough. Thank you, Kevin. She goes. Do you have gender dysphoria? Oh yeah, heavily. Did you see and hear how delighted she was to say that she had heavy gender dysphoria? Oh my God. And then she says, it's sometimes hard because I can't look mask. Well, I'll tell you how you can look mask. Oh, I'm sure. It's hard because I can't look mask. All right. In this sampler platter of muchli, I saved for last the pièce de #resistance.
I'll go out to eat with you and I'll chill with you a little bit and then I'm going home. Ain't doing nothing else. Your shit is your shit. My shit is my motherfucking shit. Yeah, because we ain't living with you forever, honey. Yeah, because that pink bedroom set is going to look very nice in a bedroom by itself. Yeah, because I already got shit planned. So. I can't wait to have the white walls with the pink bedroom set. Stop playing with a bitch. I don't even paint the whole house pink. Don't fucking play with me.
Okay. I'ma chew with you for a few minutes. That's what we're calling eating now? Chew with you? Okay. I need somebody from the audience out here to come up in Vermont and come to my house to chew with me, okay? We're gonna have lunch and co-chew together. All right, honey. There is so very much about that unfortunate individual that doesn't fit. And when I was writing the script, I told myself, I said, self, don't reach to the bottom of the barrel for the cheap joke. But you know what? I'm going to do it anyway. Hey, you guys! Okay, that's the show. Did you like it? You better say yes. Yes, mommy, what? Do you want to help pay to make it happen? Yes, you do. We would sure love it if you did. Hop on over and give us a one-time gift so easily at disaffected.com. Just click on support us. And if you want to be part of the, I was going to say the Mouseketeer Club, but it's a club of disaffectants. These are the people I like more because they give us money every month. Go over to disaffectedpod.substack.com or subscribestar.com/disaffected. And if you sign up, I will see you on the first Saturday of April in the Sanity Lounge. Talk to you next week.